it's a story about a person who did bad things.
Right.
And in order for it to make its point, the person has to do the bad things. The fact that it's
an interactive story. It's a game.
Right.
So you are by proxy doing it.
You are by proxy doing it, but not in the way in which you're supposed to feel guilty, but just in the way
it's just the story.
I participate in this level of simulated violence all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't really think about it as it being a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not a big deal. That's not the point either. The point is just consider it. What's up? Welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
My name is Kason.
And we are here with Sam once again. Welcome back, Sam.
Yep.
We're gonna talk about Spec Ops: The Line. This is our final episode on it. We're gonna finish up everything today. So pretty interesting. We recorded 2 episodes a couple weeks ago because the 2 of us were going to be out of town, and seeing some of the response to the last episode it surprised me more than I thought it would.
Yeah.
And so there's some things I want to go over in response to some people offering criticism of the game, particularly on the point that we talked about last time with the does the game try to make you feel bad for doing what you do, and is it really?
Yes, but is the game not trying to make you feel bad?
Well,
in some way, right?
Anyway,
the way that a book makes you kind of feel things.
I have a lot that I want to say on this, but also on the point of is it actually like a valid defense to say that, oh, you could just stop playing the game? That's something I want to address as well, because I don't think these developers wanted you at any point to drop their game and not finish it.
Right.
So
that being said, many people do.
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to go over that at the end. So we're going to have a whole section at the end once we've gotten through everything here to address some comments and give some responses to that. So just want you guys to know that.
Cool.
But we left off right after the white phosphorus scene. Right?
There was a little bit after the water truck crash.
Did we finish that whole thing?
We did that.
We did.
Yeah.
We did. Okay. So we got further than I remembered.
Yeah.
There were a couple of things I think we missed, though, in between.
Well, there's one big thing, and this was brought up in episode 2 from a lot of people, that there was at least one person there who could speak Farsi on that team.
Yes, right.
And I remember hearing something. I figured it was just really, really basic, just like, oh, hey, let's talk. I didn't know that they really actually legit spoke Farsi. Once again, I brought this up on that episode, but Farsi is not the language of Dubai.
Yeah, right.
More people speak English than Farsi.
Right.
And everyone speaks Arabic. Well, not everyone, but that's the language of Dubai. So it's once again, I was thinking about this and I was wondering, why exactly are people speaking Farsi, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, okay, first of all, let me finish what I'm saying and then I'll get into the whole Farsi thing. Then the people respond in English and say, why? So you can kill us too?
Right.
So that is a communication. They are able to communicate, right? The communication sort of happens. It just escalates to gunfire like very quickly.
Yeah.
And then at whatever point, it's like, hey, should we talk to these people? And the guy says it's too late for that. Well, in some ways, yes, but it's never too late, right? There's always a choice.
There's always a choice.
But they can sort of speak Farsi, and those other people can speak English. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Anyways, we had brought up earlier that they couldn't communicate, but at the very least, at least we know now, they just won't communicate. And I believe both parties are responsible on that end.
Sure.
Farsi, though, this is interesting because he got saved in Kabul, right?
Yes, Walker.
Now, the language of Kabul is not Farsi. It is, I can't remember what it is. It's, what is it, Urdu? Or it's a variant of Farsi. It's part of the Persian family of languages, right? Okay. This is evidence for this whole Dubai thing actually not being real to begin with. Like the whole thing, none of it's real because they don't speak Farsi in Dubai, but they do speak something like Farsi in Kabul. And to the extent that he's got some weird memory issues and he goes into Dubai and wow, everyone's speaking Farsi. Unless the developers just totally got it wrong and they don't know that Farsi is not a very common language spoken in Dubai. It's so strange that I would say that if this was intentional, what it could be saying is something like, this is all This is all a dream.
It's all a dream.
To begin with. Right. He is in a not real world. And as we mentioned before, of course, with the rappelling down and down, you're on the top of a sand dune, and then before you know it, you're in the 50th story of a building, and you've got to go down, right? Yeah. So none of it really makes sense. But the language actually factors into the fact that this whole thing is off in a way that just defies reality.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's another thing I kind of wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
As I went through the game a second time.
Oh, good.
There are certain things I just cannot logically, they just don't make sense. They don't
in
match
reality.
up. And there's a certain point at which this kind of begins to be true more so.
Yeah.
And it's actually after the helicopter crash, so this may go into a little bit more of what, the writer was talking about, where that's kind of where he died or whatever. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how that changes an interpretation, like how I interpret the story. There's a whole lot to get through, but I think we should probably just first actually finish the summary and get through like all the points, and then kind of like walk back and kind of dig into all that. But that is something I want to touch on, so I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, so I think, I can't remember, because it's been a couple weeks. I guess we got all the way up through that's right, because I talked about how I tried to shoot him in the head and he moved his head at the last second.
That's right.
He got burned alive or whatever.
Classic.
So I guess we did get up to that point, but I'm wondering, because there's a couple things I took notes on leading up to that I wonder if we had touched on.
Okay.
So after the scene with the white phosphorus, you come into that room where all the soldiers are lined up in the chairs. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
And this is the first time Conrad's voice comes over a radio and starts
this where
talking
he
to you.
sees. It's where he finds the radio on the table or something.
Yeah,
and picks
right.
it up.
And so, specifically that radio. That's how he's talking to him. That's something that is pointed at in the sort of the closing cutscene of the game.
Yeah, yeah.
But this is where I think it's very important to note that it's right after the guilt of having used the white phosphorus on those 47 innocent civilians that he starts hearing Conrad and begins to make a justification for now I have to do this in order for what I did.
That's so interesting.
To be justified or whatever.
Because wasn't that when he left after the white phosphorus incident, as he left, it was something like Conrad has to pay for this or something like that, right? And it's like, okay, wow. And then just conveniently he finds this thing and now, hey, I know where Conrad is. Let's go.
Yes. Yeah. So it was basically at that point, at that breaking point for them, that he starts to actually interact with Conrad. So there was no interaction with Conrad. There was no Conrad talking to them or leading them out or welcome to
because there was the possibility that Conrad was still maybe a good-ish person up until that point.
Yeah,
maybe
he that's what Walker believed, anyways. And so now he's because they're rappelling down right after this, and he's like, "I thought you knew this guy. I thought I did too." But this is all him beginning to create a new villain, in his mind, to attach blame to rather than accepting it himself.
And it's a villain based on the things that he did, right? It's like, no, he made me do bad things.
Yes.
And so it's a projection of his internal, like, insecurities. Well, insecurities is probably the biggest understatement. But it's like the venomous monster lurking in his shadow that he's projecting outwards, and he's like, it's not me, it's over there, it's this other thing.
Exactly.
And now let's go get it, guys. Don't you all see it too? You see it too, right? Yeah, let's go. And they're like they're following him. I'm actually kind of shocked at the extent to which they follow him.
And this is my major criticism of this particular twist, is that there seems to be no protest from Lugo or Adams that Walker's pretending to talk to someone on a radio that clearly has no batteries in it, and they never raise this as an objection or like a reason for. I think he's going crazy. Like we probably shouldn't keep following him.
But they have to follow him because in Dreamland they are projections too. Right. They are his good angel and his bad angel on each shoulder.
If you're gonna go with that interpretation, that the whole thing,
if they're speaking Farsi, this is a dream world.
The thing is that I don't like that. I'm okay personally with interpreting that everything after the helicopter crash is a hallucination in his dying moments. There's actually some other sort of key pieces of evidence for this. I don't know if you knew this, Sam. I want to kind of point this over to you here. on the start screens that change throughout the game, over time.
Yeah.
There's moments where you can hear like slow helicopter blades kind of in the background.
Yeah,
and then
I
they go
remember that.
away. So it starts, the
Right,
very first
right.
one before you begin the game where the helicopter scene happens, you hear that. Then it goes away up until the point where you get to the helicopter scene again much later. Then you start to hear those slow helicopter blades again.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
And this is something we talked about in Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah, the helicopter.
And that's all I'm going to say
just thinking
for
that,
now in order to not spoil that movie. But
Yeah.
there's something similar with helicopter blades, like slow motion helicopter blades there.
Yeah, yep.
And that sort of leads me to think that that was their way of sort of hinting at, yes, this is like in the moments,
Like a liminal space, yeah.
right, where you're in your dying moments and you're sort of remembering or reliving some things.
Yeah.
So I think that could be good evidence for that. So I wouldn't say anything before the helicopter. Well, unless, and this is another sort of theory I have on this, because the helicopter crash happens right at the beginning, right? So it crashes, and then it's his mind recounting what happened leading up right to that and trying to justify what he had just done. There could be points in there in which he's sort of trying to justify his actions and maybe slightly changing how those memories play out to favor himself or to make himself look better or justify what he's doing. So it could be that these events more or less happened the way they did, but it may be like those fades to white or something were like moments where it's him sort of like going through that memory, but trying to like justify his actions or make himself look better in all of it, right? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense at all?
It does.
Yeah.
I just once again, I don't know exactly where you draw the lines because the white flashbacks happen, but then where does that end? Where does reality come back after the dip to white?
If I'm not mistaken,
Like, does it just fade back into reality and then another flash
if I'm
white?
not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong if you know this, Sam. I don't think there are any flashes to white after the helicopter crash
really?
second time. It cuts to black at that point.
I can buy that.
And I don't believe there are any more fades to white after that.
Okay.
So I believe that it's all...
That means that's all real and everything else is...
No. I
know.
think...
I'm just kind of turning the idea on its head a little bit.
I actually thought it was reverse, but I could be wrong on that. I thought that most of the transitions after the helicopter crash were to white, but I could certainly be wrong.
You could be completely right about that, and I could be totally... Because I got so confused about the flashes to white, because if these are... It didn't seem to link up to me or to make sense that he would be hallucinating, say, the very freaking beginning.
Yeah,
where,
they're not 100% consistent.
Yeah, they don't
I
seem
think that
to
there's a
be.
general motif there, but I think that there are some times where, like, if you interpret, every single time there's a flash to white, it means that he did just finish or is now starting to hallucinate, then there are going to be some times that doesn't line up.
But how else did they determine when to dip to white and when to dip to black?
Yeah, because I thought
I'm not
that
entirely
was...
certain. That's the idea, generally speaking.
Now, if
But,
this was a fan
I do remember
theory...
there are a couple times that I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
About that one.
See, now if this was a fan theory, I would agree because it's like, it's not perfect, but it's close, But this
Yeah.
was from the developer, right? Didn't he
I
say?
don't know.
remember though that it was from the developer.
I'm pretty sure he said
In
specifically.
response to executive meddling, like this was not the original plan. For the story.
Okay. So that's
Like,
where some of the variation might come into play, where it's not
Right.
exact, but it's close.
Yeah, that's the thing
Okay.
about all of it is like that we can talk about it as though there are hallucinations and stuff like that, but when it comes down to it, all of that was essentially entered in afterwards as a response to the requirement to start with the helicopter scene. So like there's honestly, my approach to it is usually just to like not really consider that as part of the as a canonical explanation or whatever. It's more of a circumstantial response to something.
I think you might be right about that, yeah.
But I mean, that's not to say that theory doesn't like hold water or that we shouldn't talk about it or whatever. Like personally, I don't really hold to it, and I don't feel much need to hold to it since it was, a frustrated response to meddling rather than an actual like originally planned element of the story.
Sure. Yeah, and like what I came to in trying to like piece this all together was like, this part of it doesn't really matter so much to me as, say, sort of the core thematic elements we've been talking about, you know, the idea that when you come into a situation like he did and going against the training, I think we had another patron here who's served in the military who in other discussions on our Discord has talked about how Walker's like the worst soldier on earth. Like, like this is so against like what he would have been trained to do. Either he was trained like so poorly that it's just totally unacceptable, or Beardmo, who's here with us. So this is kind of where, and I don't want to get too much into theorizing like what's really going on. I think it's interesting to talk about, but I did get the sense that if we're going to take what happens after the helicopter crash, which I don't think is in reality that much, like you go all the way up to where they destroy the tower where the radio man is, and then the crash happens after that. Everything that happens after that is just Walker just beelining it to the big tower in the distance and wanting to, you know, take out Conrad. Yeah. So there's not really a lot of plot that happens after that point. And it's, you know, he has his big hallucinations where, you know, he's starting to be told by Conrad, you know, this really was your fault. You know, you're trying to deflect the blame. So there's not a lot of plot that happens after that. All that plot happens before, as far as events, arriving in Dubai, getting involved, starting to fight against the 33rd, you know, learning about the CIA's role, you know, the whole plot to take the water, and it was really to destroy it and everything else. So I could see him dying in that helicopter crash not being some sort of way of explaining the whole thing was a dream, right? It's like everything up to that point was real. And then everything that happens after that, his acceptance of what he did or not, depending on what you choose to do at the end, is what's happening in his mind in his dying moments. And I don't think there's that much plot afterwards that is technically a dream if you look at it that way. Does that make sense? I don't know if, like, because you had brought up last time that you don't like that interpretation. Does that still bring up problems for how you read it?
It makes sense. It's more of a preference for me, if I'm being honest. Like it works. It also works generally, I think, to consider it all as something that actually happened. It's more a matter of which interpretation you like more. And I think that it's important too to note that, like, this is a thing for stories in general, but especially for stories like this one, that something not being realistic or likely is not necessarily an argument for it being fake or even for it being a mistake. Like this is very, very true of Heart of Darkness and Apocalypse Now also. Like, there is a lot of yes, these are stories about characters traversing a literal place, doing literal actual things with literal actual people, but there's also a lot of metaphor within that. The landscapes of all of these stories are basically metaphors for going further and further down into human depravity and away from, like, the collective moral judgment and civilization and stuff. And so you have these scenarios where something happens that is not entirely realistic, like, you know, being on a sand dune and then coming out at the top of a skyscraper. And that's not to say this is fake. Like you can present that as what is really actually happening in the story without the presentation of it necessarily being realistic, because the point is to present the story in a way that is thematically, narratively, metaphorically compelling. So, like, in my mind at least, there are a lot of, or Walker for that matter, like, you're right, a soldier, like, with actual training probably would not have done what Walker did. Walker did what he did because that's what we do in a video game, in a shooter game, is we see a problem, we keep shooting, we keep moving forward, we keep going, and we don't think too hard about why. That is a decision that, if we're trying to look at it as a story that makes logical sense on all levels, then that doesn't necessarily connect, but it does match with what the story is trying to accomplish.
Sure.
And I think that we can view it as something that happens in a literal interpretation of the story without saying, well, this doesn't make sense, thus it must be fake in the story's canon. So that's more of my approach. Like, there are a number of, like inconsistencies or something like that, some of which I think are definitely intentional, and some of which I'm not sure if they were, like the Farsi thing.
I don't know.
But I guess in my mind, that doesn't, like, my mind doesn't immediately go to, well, it must not be real then. It just goes to, there are a lot of elements of this that, even if they literally happen in the story, aren't necessarily meant to be a realistic thing that would happen if this happened in real life, but something that is contributing to the overall point, especially with the meta commentary. Some things just wouldn't make sense, but they're trying to make a point about video games, so there's a degree to which it's going to behave like a video game, and that's not always how real life logic goes.
So
I don't know. That's my approach for it.
I like that. Again, I like that explanation. I think that's good.
Yeah, and again, that's not to say that theories about it being fake or whatever, especially since Walt Williams did espouse one himself, are like wrong or anything. Just that my personal preference is more the other direction.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that walking that line between what their meta commentary was about the way we approach violence in games as a reward, all that stuff we've talked about previously, versus trying to tell a story about fictional, literal events that happened in this version of Dubai and whatnot. I think you're getting at the heart of what I believe the intention was. But I do think that in doing so, it confused some people and created some of the criticism that we've been sort of like talking about, where people are taking this like super personally. Like, oh, these people are trying to tell me I'm bad because I played their video game that they made and, used this white phosphorus that they gave me no choice not to use. And now they're trying to like preach at me about how awful a human being I am in real life. And I don't think that was the meta message. And I'll get into why later. I don't think that was, I actually find that, with all due respect, patently absurd. It seems totally obvious to me that that's not what they're trying to say to their players. But I do think that in this melding of the meta story that they're trying to tell and this fictional story about Walker they're trying to tell, it blurs some lines in a way that confused some people, might have actually contributed to creating the idea in people's minds that this was what they were trying to say, that the meta commentary, the meta story was like the real thing, the real message of what they were trying to say. And I think there's more nuance to it than that, but
it's one of those things, like, I think that happens a lot within media in general. Like, I think of The Matrix and how, like, there are a lot of people who drastically misunderstand The Matrix, right?
Sure, yeah.
And, like, I understand why, like, taken in isolation, the whole red pill, blue pill thing could stand for literally any, like, hey, here's the hard reality and here's the easy ignorance. And that could just apply to anything. But taken as a whole, like, man, I can't tell you how many sermons I heard, because I was raised in church, saying, like, oh, the red pill is accepting the truth of God and stuff like that. And then I'm actually watching The Matrix, like,
wait.
This is the most postmodern thing I've ever seen. It's absolutely not like a Christian message.
No, I'm pretty sure the red pill is the fruit, for the forbidden fruit, because he's in the Garden of Eden where everything's all perfect and happy. And Morpheus is like, eat this fruit, and then you will be able to, your mind will be opened, right? It's literally the opposite. It's the opposite of what your preacher said.
But yeah, like, we have a lot of these situations where there's this thing that is nuanced enough that people can look at it on a surface level and get it completely wrong. And then, but then there are layers below that. And then in situations like this, it's especially difficult because that surface is meant to, like, to trigger you emotionally, essentially. And I don't mean to, like, use that word, that's an actual, like, psychological term. I don't mean to use it flippantly, but, like, this is meant to engage you on a level that does make you uncomfortable. And for a lot of people, that will understandably trigger an emotional response before it triggers, like, oh, well, okay, I'm going to delve deep into exactly what this is saying, So, like, I understand on some level, but I do agree with you that, like, it's a patently incorrect way to look at the game, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a lot as we continue.
Nice.
I'm sorry, I do need to go for just a second, but I'll be
You're good.
Okay, go ahead.
You're good.
I wanted to bring up Pan's Labyrinth, in our analysis of Pan's Labyrinth, something similar to this is like, what's real, what's not, what's not real, like what. And I really like Sam's response there, because it's like, it's not so supremely important to the interpretation of the story to know what is technically real and technically not. Right? Central to the message is a lot of I don't know, the way that the game is able to convey its message is very effective, and whether or not the game is super consistent in helping you to understand what part is dream world and what part is like real life is not that relevant, because I mentioned in the Pan's Labyrinth review that we did that I'm not super interested in the question of what was real and what wasn't. Right? Now, a game like this happened, like, I'm curious about it, but it's not that important relative to what the game's saying. Because, like, Alice in Wonderland or whatever, like, you can have a completely crazy story, and it's like, well, did that actually happen or not? Or like a Majora's Mask or something like that. And it's like, well, yes, it actually happened in a way, and that's all that you need to know, you know? Like, the packaging of events in a metaphorical or in the way that it is presented to us in a dreamlike manner, that's the way they chose to present it, but that doesn't mean the whole thing is completely a dream. But I really appreciate the artfulness in the way that they decided to tell this story.
Sure.
Very meaningful.
I kind of came to the same conclusion today as I was sort of, cleaning up my notes and stuff, is like... I was getting a little bogged down and trying to figure that out, and it was like, it's really not the point, and I'm not sure that it's that important to like have figured that out, and it just kind of opens up many ways to interpret the story, which can be fine, as long as it's being communicated, like the real central point, which I think is maybe even in some people's opinion too strongly or too on the nose in how it basically delivers that, and we'll get into that too. But I just wanted to bring all that up. So when we finish the water scenario, right? You've been separated from Adams and Lugo. You hear them over the comms. Lugo has been he's like being held at gunpoint. And you sort of come up and you help them out of that situation. You keep fighting forward. And this is where the first, like, really major hallucination happens, right? Where there's, like, that heavy soldier in that room, and the lights start, like, flickering on
the flashing
and off.
lights. Yeah.
And you're, like, shooting at him, but it's just a mannequin.
It's a mannequin.
Like, what the heck?
That was
over here.
Very
so
interesting.
it's the first, like, major event where you can see that Walker is basically broken psychologically at this point, like totally just, he's lost it, right?
It's one of the things that I find really interesting about this game, like structurally, because it is far from the only game to be, normal action game and then turn into a horror game on some level. Like I think back to like Halo or a bunch of others, but it is interesting because it doesn't like. There are a few scenes that I would say are horror adjacent in terms of their actual presentation, but most of the time it's still a military shooter aesthetically speaking, but like structurally it becomes more of a horror game. Suddenly we're dealing less with, we have to go and accomplish the thing by shooting the guys, and more with, what is even real, with things getting increasingly dire and violent and uncertain. It really turns into a horror story in relatively like subtle foundational ways instead of outward ones. It's really interesting.
It was a really cool moment, and one that I definitely wasn't expecting.
Well, this was playing it. The most Silent Hill 2 moment of the whole game so far, especially given that they're mannequins, right? It's just like, whoa.
Oh, yeah.
Drew those connections.
And then at the end of this sequence, you end up basically interrogating a soldier. What was his name? Josh something. Anyway, his name isn't that important. The important part is that Walker is like super over the line aggressive and like willing to kill him, and like he's just totally lost it. Let me see if I can find the note here.
His like in-game dialogue and executions and stuff have been getting a lot more. Like we mentioned this before, but it does get increasingly. It isn't even
especially
as bad as it gets at this point, but like it does take a sharp turn after the white phosphorus and really start progressing.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely after that scene exactly. In fact, there's a couple
he's
of other
blaming
things.
them for everything he's done.
Yes.
So the more that Walker turns into a monster, the more that he projects that monster onto his enemies as he's fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So he's killing monsters now. It's like legit monsters. He feels no remorse.
Yeah, so I took a couple notes right after the scene where the two guys were hanging, and he tried to give you a choice of which one to kill.
Oh yeah, we didn't.
I do have some thoughts on that, but keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a scene after that where you're fighting your way and a sandstorm comes through, right? And they end up having to take shelter in this sort of empty tanker.
Yeah,
and
that's crazy.
I took the dialogue down. I know you're listening, Colonel, so hear this. This war is over. Dubai will be evacuated, and you will be relieved of your command. So he is inventing a new justifiable reason to continue. Now, in order to make all of this worth what we've done,
so he can still be a hero.
I've got to take Conrad down because he's the one who set up this whole scenario.
And then evacuate all the people out.
Yes.
Right? Which Conrad tried, and apparently a lot of people died.
Yes.
So once again, he's taking a low probability success route to heroism.
Yes.
Once again, where it's like, probably not going to work out the way you think.
And what I think is so crazy about this is that at no point before the white phosphorus scene had Walker talked badly or even thought badly about Conrad. He had respect for him. He admired him.
Yes.
He thought he was a good man.
Yeah.
It's only right after the white phosphorus scene, right, that he all of a sudden feels personally betrayed by him.
Yep.
And that the whole reason he went through all of this
I got the meme. I got the meme.
Go for it.
You know that 3-part meme with the guy's riding a bike and he's holding a stick, and then he puts the stick in the spokes,
in his own
and
tire.
then he falls down, and then the last part would be, "Dang it, Conrad! That stupid Conrad! It's his fault."
Yeah, that's basically exactly what's going on. And so Conrad's not even alive anymore. We know, right? So if we're taking this into account, he's imagining receiving calls from Conrad, sending him on to do all these other awful choices and other things that totally invented. Those two guys that were hanging were just corpses.
Moral, what would you call it? Morally ambiguous choices, right?
Yeah.
Like who should die, him or him, or And I think that's a big part of it because he's having a moral dilemma moment right now.
Yes,
because of everything he's done, and he's trying to explore all the ways that you can still morally kill people, right?
Yes.
Oh, well, what if they did a wrong thing and who do you kill? Yeah, see, it's like, morality's ambiguous, right? It's not like, set in stone. And so he's trying to convince himself that morally speaking, he's still sort of justified.
Yeah. Just an endless practice of the fallacy of sunk cost. It's just like he just cannot accept what has happened, right? And he's got to continue to, okay, well, then I've got to do this. And we talked about that last time quite a bit, so I won't get into that. But he's using this, he's inventing this now. This is not like a thing that's actually happening. He's inventing.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's
completely. On a person he's who he previously admired and respected. He's now turning that person into a villain to do anything he can not to accept that what he did was his fault, or that it was his choice or whatnot. Yep. So you start to see that in all of his communications to Conrad. He'll keep calling him, and he kind of gets further and further. Even later on, if you're listening, Colonel, here's what happens now. I'm going to kill every last one of your men, and then I'm going to kill you. Sergeant Lugo is dead, and for that I will give no quarter, right? So increasingly, even his communications with Conrad become more and more unhinged and just driven by revenge. But it's all over this idea that he totally invented, that a dead person who's not even involved anymore was the cause of all of this and led me to do this, right?
I could almost think that the way that Walker views Conrad is the evolution of the way that Walker views Conrad is the evolution of the way that Walker views himself. That as soon as he has stepped over the line of the point of no return, specifically with the white phosphorus, although you could argue it happened well before that, all of a sudden it's like Conrad's a bad guy, and Conrad becomes more and more of a villain all the way up until the end. And of course, what we learn at the very end is that Conrad is gone, and then you have the choice, looking in the mirror, of facing your own demons, because Conrad is you, basically.
Yes,
anyways,
exactly. Okay, so
I do have to say real quick, the choice with the two hanging men.
Yes, that's good.
I find very interesting because it's one of two of my favorite choices in the game, and the reason is because it is very much the definition of a choice that doesn't affect anything. There is no long-term consequence regardless of what you do. But there are a lot of options that are not there. Conrad, or that aren't like explicitly made known to you. Conrad says like, "Oh, which one do you want to shoot?" You can shoot one of them. You can also shoot the ropes to let them down. You can refuse to shoot them and just keep walking, at which point snipers will try and fire on you.
Right.
You can, like, there are multiple ways that you can interact with that choice that are not made explicitly clear by the game, which is really, I think, a really good distillation of what the choices are here for in the first place, because they're not here to let you do something different. In fact, I would argue that letting you do something different, I think we talked about this a bit before, would like ruin the point, right? Like, it'll let you be a good moral invader of this land.
Let you save everybody, yeah.
Yeah, like it you know, all of this is bad. That's the point. If you could make it good, it would ruin everything. But so the choice doesn't change things or allow you to be something different, but it does encourage you to think more deeply about what's happening in the game than the game is necessarily letting on that you can, which is much of the point, right? This game exists to try and, like, you know, trick you and then reveal its trick in a way that makes you think that you might want to think a little more deeply about this sort of thing. And that is what choices like this offer, that, like, you could just do what the game says, but there are other options too. Other ways to approach it that you would have to actually think, oh, well, maybe I can do this instead in order to actually have access to.
Sure.
So I think it's a good example.
You could turn off the game.
we're gonna talk about that.
Keep going.
We're gonna talk about that later.
Pretend I didn't say that.
So this leads up to you interrogate this guy. He says something about, like, you can't do this, you know, like, you can't do it. He's like, I can do whatever I want. So he's no longer following any sort of code or, like, rules of engagement or anything like that. He's just full on, like, he's going to murder whoever he has to get to Conrad. So the guy reveals that the radio man is in that tower over there, which leads our guys over to go. They basically want to use the broadcasting system the radio man is using to try to let people know, hey, we're here to evacuate you. Get out.
Yes.
But as you go in there, and as the radio man's holding a little white flag. I don't know if you saw that.
I did, yes. He's, like, smoking. He's holding,
Yeah, and he, of course, you know, kind of just joking, you know, being snarky or whatever.
Yes.
So Lugo sort of, asks for an explanation of how this works and how do I boost the signal and how far can it really get. And he shows him how to do it. Okay, you're on the air, you're live, you know, say whatever you want to say. And then as soon as he's done that, Lugo just, like, pops him right in the head. Yep. And then he tries to justify that action. I did what was necessary, like, and so, like, they've all freaking lost it.
Yes.
Well, I will say, it almost feels like Adams has an opposite.
Yeah, like, that's true. Adams
Lugo
maybe
definitely,
not so much.
I view Lugo and Adams as essentially two opposites that, over the course of their character arcs, crisscross and go to the other side.
I think you mentioned that in your video.
Yeah, Lugo starts off as being just, you know, very jovial, and he's the one with more of a conscience. Adams is more of the, like, oh, well, I'm going to follow orders. That's what I'm going to do. Doesn't really matter if I think it's right or wrong or whatever. But over time, like, Lugo wasn't cheery because he was more sane or whatever. He was cheery because that's how he covered over the fact that he murders people for a living, right? Like, he wasn't healthily dealing with it. Yes. And as this gets worse and worse and worse, his mental state and his moral compass declines, whereas Adams eventually gets to a point where he starts taking more issue with what Walker is doing, and then eventually, like, basically gets himself killed for the sake of, like, I mean, even when he does that, he still does it in a way that allows his commanding officer to continue forward. Like, he still can't break those rules or whatever, but it is pretty clearly like, you know, I don't want to be part of this anymore.
Yeah,
I'm going to do one last thing to help my CO, but that's going to be it. I'm out. Like,
yeah.
So yeah, they have kind of these situations where they almost switch places as they decline.
Yes, because it was Adams who was calling for using the white phosphorus, and Lugo who was against it. And then at this point now, you're right. They've kind of reversed a little bit. So as Walker gets on and tries to explain, okay, we're here to evacuate you, like, he hears the voice of Conrad again. Telling basically, it's like, I've tried this, is impossible. If you're not going to learn from my mistakes, then you've left me no choice. And there's a helicopter there that starts shooting at you. So there's a big, exciting sequence to escape that tower. In doing so, you get into a helicopter yourself. You just just destroy the entire tower and like blow it all the way. You're killing just like thousands of freaking soldiers and people at this point. And then we have the actual helicopter crash, which we've kind of all gone over. This could or could not be the point where Walker dies and is trying to justify his actions in his mind through the events that come after this. So he sort of wakes up, and I wrote that he sees the Eye of Sauron.
Of course.
It's just fire surrounding that big tower. I think it's supposed to be, what's the name of it? The tallest...
The Burj Dubai.
The Burj Khalifa.
The Burj Khalifa.
Burj Khalifa. I think it's supposed to be that, but they don't call it that in the game.
I think they call it not like... It's like on the coast and separated from the rest of the towers, which is not how it, like they are utilizing it that way, but it's not actually like a realistically, this is not Assassin's Creed, right? They didn't like realistically recreate Dubai.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. Mix is bringing up, of course, there's a Tower of Babel symbolism going on here.
Very interesting.
So, but the Tower of Dubai, I think, is what they call it, and that's where they're going to. That's where Conrad is supposed to be, like the headquarters of the 33rd, right?
Yeah.
So he says, I should say, Conrad says to Walker, Captain Walker, can you hear me, Colonel? Open your eyes, Walker. I need you to see what you've done. Dubai should have died long ago. We were ordered to abandon these people. Instead, we chose damnation. And then there's another voice as a person starts walking toward you. Not all of us. Who's there, says Walker. One of your victims, the one who was just following orders. But you gave us no choice. There was always a choice.
Yep.
You just screwed it up. I tried to save you. Deep down, you knew we all had to die. This wasn't my fault. And then, Captain, help, Lugo. He's like hallucinating Lugo. And then Conrad says, there were over 5,000 people alive in Dubai the day before you arrived. How many are alive today, I wonder? How many will be alive tomorrow, given
the water
situation? Yeah. I thought my duty was to protect the city from the storm. I was wrong. I have to protect it from you. So then that hallucination kind of goes away. You join up with Adams again, but you hear Lugo. He's in another place. And
well, hold on. Is this the hallucination where you see where he says "Welcome to Hell," or does that happen a little bit later?
I took
where everything's
the dialogue
on fire,
and I didn't
everything's on fire.
That,
all of a sudden, everything's black and charred and on fire, and it basically says "Welcome to Hell," and you're seeing.
I think that's later because
that's later.
Okay, just, like the tower with the fire coming, off of it towards you or whatever, and that is different from everything being on fire. But I think that's
okay.
So Adams and Walker are now trying to get their way to Lugo, who ends up being lynched by a mob of people.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And the choice that you're given here is you can fire into the crowd, or you can fire at the ground or in the air to sort of scare them away, right?
Yeah.
It's worth noting too. You can also just stand there and let them pelt you with rocks until you die.
Oh, sure.
Right.
That's not
there's
a way
so
to
many
progress, but
there's so many different ways.
Scenario where it doesn't, the Paragon choice, fire in the air, or renegade, shoot at them. It just leaves you there to do what you will.
Yeah. That's actually cool. I didn't even consider that. That's another. You could just accept the punishment for what you've done at that point, I guess. But you wouldn't be able to beat the game that way, right?
Nope. You'd have to do one of the other things. Yeah.
So, there was a line of dialogue actually before you get to Lugo. I guess Lugo has a broken arm, right? So Adams says, I'm not sure he's going to live through this. And Walker's like, it's a broken arm. We've both lived through worse. He's like, that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
And Walker's like, okay, well, if you have something in your mind, go ahead and say it. It's like this whole mission is effed up. We just took out a tower full of American troops in a helicopter shooting this freaking Gatling gun or whatever. We just just destroyed this whole tower and killed who knows how many American troops we just killed. This is insane at this point. It's like, they didn't leave us any choice. You didn't leave us any choice. What happened to us, man? It's like, nothing. We're soldiers. It's like, oh, okay, I see. My mistake. I really, really liked that response from Adams. It's because we're soldiers.
He's dehumanizing himself.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
He's like, we're not people. We're just soldiers. Oh, soldier. Oh, yeah. Okay, soldiers can do that stuff. People shouldn't do that, but soldiers can.
Exactly.
I think there's this element too of the mentality of just like following orders essentially being sort of like
Justified.
paralleled with what the player is doing, right?
Yes, yes.
Like that's a very similar thing. Like we're just doing what the game's saying to do. We're just pushing forward, doing what it says. And I think that concept of like the mentality of I am here to do what the person in charge is telling me to do is being, compared to this mindset of the player. I'm here to do what the game is telling me to do, and that will be, rewarded. That's what I'm supposed to do. And it's kind of trying to say in both cases, like, no, not necessarily.
Very good.
I agree with that. I think that's a really good point. Okay, so now you get to the kind of the final section here. There's a ton of guys to kill. There's some good lines though.
There are a lot of good lines from this point in the game.
Yeah. So it says, after Lugo is dead, the whole line I referred to earlier, where they're making their way, if you're listening, colonels, here's what happens now. I'm going to kill every last one of your men, all that stuff. And then you and Adams are kind of like bunkered down behind some cover. Or I say you, I mean Walker. And Walker says, you okay? And he says, do I look okay? What happened to Lugo isn't our fault. Don't tell me what I already know. Lugo's blood is on your hands. Not mine. It's like, Conrad deserves to die. You know that. Like, come on. And what do we deserve? Well, I think we both know the answer to that. Right?
So you both deserve to die. So what are you doing?
Yes, exactly.
And everyone else is just collateral as you both like careen towards your fates.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. But here's my line for that. Oh, go ahead. You first, Sam.
Oh, just the cognitive dissonance at this point is becoming strong enough that even Walker can't completely block it out, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And knowing that you deserve death, but being like, I'm not going to die until I kill that other guy, right?
Yep.
That line, Conrad deserves to die. And my note on that says, well, some that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life.
You give it to them, Walker.
Do not be so eager to deal out death and judgment. Even the very wise cannot see all ends, which was more or less your point early on, which is like these assumptions that were wrong that you're just digging deeper on. It's like even the very wise cannot see all ends. Like, so you don't think that you are so correct, so completely right, and especially if you're killing people about it.
Yes.
Don't think that you're so completely right that you can see all ends when even the wisest can't.
Yes.
Great. And how many people do you have to kill to actually get the one that actually deserves it?
Yeah, right. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable.
I also wrote Walker ends up hallucinating Lugo as one of the heavy enemies here.
Yes, and previously we hallucinated Adams as a character that we basically killed, just like punch him in the face like 1,000 times.
Yes.
Another scenario where you can choose to just die instead. But
that's right, because it'll kill you.
Oh, because he'll shoot you. That's right.
That's why we do it. But then Adams shows up and he's like, "Whoa, what's wrong with you?" And it's just like, "Oh, he took me off guard. I didn't realize, Yep. But it's so interesting because now we hallucinated Adams' face, and then we kill Adams. Basically, we kill him, and then but it wasn't really him. Now we're hallucinating Lugo's face on somebody, and we've got to kill him too. This is like the internalizing the fact that at the very least by proxy or maybe in a roundabout way, Walker is responsible for Adams and Lugo dying, right? He killed them, so to speak.
Yes.
In the Bohemian Rhapsody sense, Freddie Mercury sense. That's what I meant.
Worth noting too that and I don't think this is particularly deep necessarily, but I think it's interesting that if the heavy soldier with Lugo's voice kills you, and you have to replay that segment, that hallucination doesn't happen again.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it just
That's
happens
very cool.
the first time, but after that,
wow,
it's already happened. You're not going to relive that same hallucination at that point. You're just it's just some random heavy guy. There's no extra dialogue or anything.
Because it's a hallucination. So of course it wouldn't happen again.
Right.
Oh, that's crazy.
That's awesome.
That's really interesting.
That's a really, really cool point.
Yeah.
Okay, so after that, this is where we, like you talked about earlier, Adams begins losing his mind. I don't want any part of this anymore, because they're being asked to surrender, and
they get surrounded basically.
Walker decides to do it because he thinks it might be the best way to actually get into the tower. Yeah, and he's just like, "What are you doing? Like, no, stop! This is crazy." And he's like, "As long as I'm breathing," I think he says, "the mission's not over." So he has a couple of really
But what
pointed,
mission? What mission?
I know,
He
right?
assigned himself this mission.
Yeah.
Ah, jeez.
So like, what does he say? Adam says, for F's sake, give it up. The mission is over. We failed. Not while I'm still breathing. Fine, then keep breathing. Then he pushes him over.
Yep,
Like,
and then
"Run,
turns
mother
and
effer."
cover fires. Yeah.
And then he's just ready. He's just done. I'm not doing this anymore. Like, fine, you go, but I'm done.
Yep.
So he dies there. And then as Walker is approaching the tower, the remnant, the last few soldiers of the 33rd, they all salute as he enters. And they're like, Captain Walker, we're all that's left of the damn 33rd, and we surrender, sir.
Yeah.
Dubai is yours.
Walker and Conrad have become one.
Mm-hmm. I love the setting for this.
Yeah,
because you enter
water.
the tower
it's wild.
literally like underwater, and on one level I love it because it is calm and serene, but it's also oppressive.
It is.
Right? Like you have the literal ocean on either side of you.
Yeah, and there's sharks and there's fish and
yeah, so like it is simultaneously more calm and beautiful and serene than pretty much anything else that's happened in the game so far. And
Yes,
yet it
totally.
also feels like, it could crash in on you at any time. But also,
yes, I
on
thought that because you have a gun, one bullet, and that whole glass structure, all that water comes down on you.
Yeah. And then also just like on that motif of downward motion, we are literally below sea level now.
We're at the bottom of the sea.
Down as we can go here. And just, it's cool. I like it.
I love that. I love that too. One other line, and because I guess we just missed this somewhere. I don't know exactly where this was. I believe it was after the helicopter crash, but it could have come a little bit later. But basically, I believe it's Conrad who says, "Welcome to hell." As soon as your hallucination, you're walking around just the normal city, and all of a sudden, boom! It flashes white, and everything's on fire. All the cars, everything's on fire, and then the radio says, "Welcome to hell," basically. And this is further evidence to complement the idea that he's dead, right? He just died. Yeah. He has been judged, and he has been sent where he belongs. Now, another, there's two different versions of hell in like ancient Hebrew cosmology. How would you put that? Theology. Where one of them is Sheol, which is more like dry. It's like a dry desert. The other one is Teom, which is wet. It's like the fountains of dissolution, basically, just like the well of primordial water from whence everything was created. You're just dissolved back into that, right? And there's like those two places. And we basically march through Sheol, which is outlined in like the books of Enoch. They kind of talk about what Sheol's like, and it's basically this game. Just deserts and death and just rocks and all that stuff. And then we enter into literally the bottom of the ocean, which is like the bottom of like the waters of Teom, basically. Yeah. And that's, anyways, it's really interesting. But the coolest part about it is that, as you mentioned at first, Sam, and I love that you mentioned this because I actually had not even realized, we go all the way down, all the way through Dubai. You're always making these prolonged downward motions. You never make a prolonged upward motion until this point. You get into this building. Everyone salutes you. You're at the bottom of the bottom. You're literally at the bottom of the ocean, surrounded by water, right? And then you take this long elevator ride, just like up. And what I love it is that you're going up towards consciousness. You're going back up towards something more along the lines of like the real world, so to speak, right? Like you're journeying back out of the depths of your mind, back all the way back forward, so that you can finally learn the actual truth. And this is where you have to confront yourself.
Yes,
right? And he wasn't doing that. He kept going down, deeper into the unconscious mind, all the way down to like the literal depths of hell. And now he is taking the ascent back up to consciousness, and we'll see if he can deal with what that entails, basically. Bringing the unconscious, as Carl Jung mentioned, bringing the unconscious back up to the conscious, right? And be careful when doing that. Like when you go fishing on the ocean of your unconscious mind, be careful that your catch doesn't drag you under, as opposed to you pulling it up. Because if you pull something up from your unconscious mind that's too big, it'll actually pull you down. So anyways, that's what's happening. We're going up. We're on our way up, and we're about to deal with the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
If anything,
which
I feel
we
like
see at the
that
top.
might be the most Silent Hill 2 thing about the game.
Yeah,
sure.
you know, there
Because of
is
all the
that
psyche
end.
stuff, but then also
Yes.
because Silent Hill 2 also has that bit where you go down
At the
long
end.
set of stairs and then you
Yes.
keep jumping down a bunch of holes and then you open a door and you're just back on the street. Like,
Totally,
Yeah, right,
totally.
right.
It's
Definitely,
so
totally
similar to that, but
parallel
also at the end of Silent Hill 2, there is that prolonged upward movement. Anyways, very similar to what's happening here.
Yeah. So I took down basically all the dialogue from the ending here. It's all fantastic.
There's so
So we're
much
just going to
good-
kind of go through all of this here. So, well done, Walker. You've done what the storm could not. Destroyed the damn 33rd. Do you feel like a hero yet? I love that question. It pointedly used the way it is here towards him.
Yep.
Yeah,
Please come
That
in.
is, I might argue, like the most important line in the game, except for
Because that's to you. That's a
Yes.
that's a fourth
Hero, but
that's a fourth wall break though.
yeah,
There-
it's
that's
one
a
of the
question
few
posed
in
to the
this scene.
player.
Well,
Yeah.
this line also appears on loading screens if you
Oh,
die
yeah,
or
we
have to
haven't even
reload the
talked
game
about
or
the loading
whatever.
screens, have
Yeah.
we?
I did die a couple
Yeah.
times, so yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you want to do that, Sam, real quick? The messages
yeah.
that come up on loading screens?
Basically, just the loading screens have it, and I should have looked some up in the first place to actually, the loading screens. At
first-
do what they often do in video games, just like, hey, push this button to reload.
Yeah,
Hey,
push the
maybe if
A
you see
button
some
to
glass-
open doors.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
right.
you see some sand behind some
Yeah.
glass, you can shoot it, and then that might help, and then slowly over time, it starts getting a lot more ominous and accusatory and weird, because instead of just telling you, like, eventually it starts doing, like, basically story questions, like, if the radio man now speaks for the 33rd, then what happened to Conrad? Rumors claim Conrad is still alive and hiding somewhere in Dubai. Stuff like that. Or defines collateral damage. Stuff like that.
Ooh,
And then
that's a big one.
and then it starts getting weirder. It's Conrad. He did it. All of it. Let's see. You are still a good person.
Oh,
Confident
that one
dissonance
cuts.
is an uncomfortable feeling you caused by holding two conflicting ideas simultaneously. There is
Yeah.
no escape. If Lugo were still alive, he would likely suffer from PTSD. So really, he's the lucky one.
Oh my gosh.
This
Oh
is
my
all your
gosh.
fault. Do you feel
That's-
like a hero yet? How many Americans
That's
have you
brutal.
killed today? To kill for yourself is murder. To kill you for your government is heroic. To kill for entertainment is harmless. Like,
Yeah,
kill
that's a
a man,
good- that's
you're
a
a
good
murderer.
line.
Kill everyone, and you're a god. Like, there are so
Whoa.
yeah, it starts getting
Oh my gosh.
weird and heavy and aggressive.
Yeah.
And this is just coming up during the loading screens. That's not, it's just another meta thing, right? It starts coming at you from places that you never would have expected it to.
Yeah.
Jeez,
Yeah.
man.
So, yeah, that
Crazy.
line in particular is one that I remember. Do you feel like a hero yet? Coming
Yeah.
from the loading screens, right? So, now that you're here, I want to ask you a question. What did you think when you arrived in Dubai? When you'd seen what I had done, did you think it was the work of a madman? Yeah, I thought you'd lost your goddamn mind. Or I hoped that that's what happened. Oh, yes, that would have made things easier. Love this. But I wasn't that lucky. We often do this, right? We often assume, again, things in order to make them easier to kind of like,
Yeah.
whether it makes our opponents look dumber or whatever.
Right.
Like, I'm going to assume that this is the context or the
And that
reality
there's
situation.
no rational
because-
reason why they would have done that. Yeah.
Because then it'll be easier for me
Yep.
to validate my point of view, right?
Yeah, we do it with mental illness specifically a lot with this, like, oh, that person was just crazy. We do that with school
Right.
shooters, with dictators, with politicians we don't like, we don't want to
Oh, of
actually
course.
think about, like, the various things that contributed to the actions they took, or to think about the
Right.
fact that maybe they did do it lucidly, even if
Yeah.
it's so horrific we can't imagine
It's-
anyone choosing to do it like they did.
But that's
it
why.
just
That's
means you're
why we
calling
refuse.
Yeah.
Because if we can't imagine it, then that means that, like, that they're outside of our imagination, even, right? That they're so
Right.
far outside the bounds.
It takes more work to
a lot of
understand
people
it than to just dismiss
exactly,
it.
exactly.
For sure.
That's tough.
And I mean, this applies to, just everybody does this. This is not like, it's a practice, I think, that we all engage in sort of like justifying or validating our worldviews or our beliefs, whatever they may be. It's really easy to point at something and interpret that in a way that makes it easiest for us to then validate what we're doing.
Yeah.
So
keep thinking what we already think.
right. Okay, so I wasn't that lucky to have been crazy. Right?
Oh, man.
You sure about that? I assure you, I'm as sane as you are, Captain. So I like that turnaround of
That's almost a backhanded
accusation, right?
Yeah.
It's like, not only am I not crazy, you're not either.
Yeah.
And you did everything you just did totally sane and lucid.
Yeah.
Right? I loved that sort of like double-edged comment from him there. No matter how hard I tried, I never could escape the reality of what happened here. That was my downfall, is Conrad talking. And he's painting. He's painting the woman and the child who were burned by the white phosphorus.
By the white phosphorus.
So he says, there, finished. Hope you like it. What the hell is going on? Your eyes are opening for the first time. It hurts, doesn't it? Go on. What do you think? And then he says to Conrad, Walker says to Conrad, you did this. No, you did. Your orders killed 47 innocent people. Someone has to pay for your crimes, Walker. Who's it going to be? And that's when he kind of disappears behind the painting there. And
that's where the mirror...
John, is that you? You tell me. I'm done playing your games, John. I assure you this is no game. And you walk forward and find the corpse of
chair.
John Conrad there, right? He's been dead the whole time.
Yep.
It seems that reports of my survival have been greatly exaggerated. This isn't possible. Oh, I assure you it is. How? Not how. Why? You were never meant to come here. And then it flashes back to, we have our orders, leave the city, radio command from outside the storm wall. They send in the cavalry. We go home.
Right.
Like, this is kind of to Beardmo's point a little bit. And part of the reason why I struggled with the setup of the scenario of the game. I really liked the back half of it more than the first half because I just could not parse why Walker would do this with a 3-man team when the orders were, okay, we just confirmed there are people here. They're going to send in a huge army or cavalry to come fix this. Why would you, unless you're just, like you said, desperate for recognition, hero status, whatever. And I guess that leads to further damning Walker for what he did. Instead of following the orders and doing what's safest for everybody involved and what logically makes the most sense and has the highest chance of success, no, I'm going to go in with a 3-man team and do this impossible task and come out of this, I don't know. It's just crazy. But
this is another one of those things that and again, I don't want to assign intentionality to everything that could be considered a flaw in this game because that would be overkill. But this is something that I do think is very intentional because that line, that concept is kind of supposed to go in one ear and out the other. As a gamer going into it with the typical mindset, especially back then, especially for this genre, you're going to do what the game is telling you to do. You're going to move forward. That's what you're going to do. You're not necessarily paying that close attention to the details of exactly what's going on. Right. That this moment here is supposed to be hey, remember that? Because you don't. You forgot it.
Actually,
completely.
Isn't that one of the messages on the loading screens too? Is do you even remember what you're doing here?
Yeah, that was one of them.
I think that's one of them. Yeah, it's a really good one. Do you even remember why you're doing this or why you're here? And I think you're right. That line basically underscores that question. Yeah. And I think most players probably didn't remember it. And
the first time I played it, I didn't.
Because it's a video game. The objective is to get to the waypoint and kill everyone in between. Yeah. It's a game. You don't need to worry about objectives in a game, right?
So then he says, what happened here was out of my control. Was it? None of this would have happened if you just stopped. But on you marched, and for what? Well, we tried to save you. You're no savior. Your talents lie elsewhere. And this is where it flashes back to all the sort of flashpoint choices that you made. Okay. Did you shoot Riggs in the head or let him burn? It'll show that. It'll show whether you fired into the crowd of the mob of people or not. Right. That kind of all flashes right there. This isn't my fault. It takes a strong man to deny what's right in front of him. And if the truth is undeniable, you create your own. And this is where he started creating his own. The whole phantom of Conrad in the first place was where he began to create like his own reality.
Is this where we see the flashback of the radio?
Yeah,
but
this
then flip
happens
it over,
there.
There's no batteries.
The fact that the two soldiers that were hanging were just dead corpses. They weren't actually alive. Like a bunch of stuff, right? The truth is, Walker, that you are here because you wanted to feel like something you're not, a hero. I'm here because you can't accept what you've done. It broke you. And then you see the battery. You know, I took note of that. The battery was not in the radio. You needed someone to blame, so you cast it on me, a dead man. I know the truth is hard to hear, Walker, but it's time. You're all that's left, and we can't live in this lie forever. This is where he points a gun. I'm going to count to 5, then I'm pulling this trigger. You're not real. This is all in my head. Are you sure? Maybe it's in mine.
And this is the mirror, right? Where we don't see him unless we look in the mirror.
Right.
Then we see him.
Yes.
Right there, that's saying something deep.
Yes. So 1, no, everything, all this was your fault. If that's what you believe, then shoot me. 2, I didn't mean to hurt anybody. I loved this. This was my favorite line of the whole game right here. These 2. I didn't mean to hurt anybody. The sincerity of the performance on that line I thought was especially potent. I did not mean to hurt anybody. And he says, no one ever does, Walker. 3. And that, I think, points to, for me, the real point of what we're getting at.
Yeah.
About making assumptions. You're doing this for what you believe are all the right reasons.
Good cause, yeah.
You're totally well-intentioned, but you're totally misinformed. You are not qualified to do what you're doing. And you're doing it out of a sense of, well, I know what's right. My moral compass, I know that and this, we see this all the time. And like we talked about earlier with public discourse and the way people argue with each other and justify the demonizing of their fellow citizens of your own country or whatever in political debates, because you know your moral compass is the right one. Right. And so your well-intentioned attempts to get involved and to make change or whatever can often lead to a lot more harm than you realize you're capable of. And you never meant to hurt anybody, but no one ever does, Walker.
Right.
And it doesn't justify it.
Yeah. I almost can imagine that line being delivered in court in front of a jury to somebody who has killed however many people he's killed, most of them, maybe not most, many of them being completely innocent civilians. And it's like, I can just almost see it. Like, this person killed like 300 people.
Yes.
A lot of them were innocent, completely inhumanely. And he's standing up on the stand next to the judge, and he's saying,
but I didn't
mean to hurt anyone. And just like, as a juror, just like you got your little notepad, and you're just like, what? Like, but we were with him every step of the way, right? Now, as a game player, we knew we were getting a war game. We're going to go kill people. But when you watch it happen, right? Those first people he shoots, and then the decision to keep going. It's almost like the metaphor of the slow boiling pot of water with the frog in it, right? You can't turn it up too much because the frog will jump out. But if you slowly turn up the heat, the frog will just slowly boil and die, and it won't realize what's happening. That's sort of how the game does it. Some people may argue whether it's perfectly effective in that or not, but it at least gives you some rationale to keep going at any point and say, they shot at us first, we found a dead American, we didn't find an alive American. Well, like, the point was to find alive Americans. We found a dead American who seemed like he'd recently died, so he was alive recently, but he's not an alive American. Should we keep going until we find an alive American, which means we got to shoot people? Oh, no, there's a live American. Oh, he shot at us, so we killed him. Now what's going on, right? The way they slowly turn up the temperature leads to that kind of justification, right? So we were with him, and we can sort of see through Walker's eyes how this all happened, right? Yeah. But just imagine being a juror in a court case and hearing somebody on the stand say that.
Sure.
It's just bewildering.
Yeah. So this is where you have a couple choices, and it'll result in several different endings. So we'll try to walk through all these. One, you can shoot Conrad, which is essentially just a denial of all of this. And his line is, "It takes a strong man to deny what's in front of him." Right, and Walker's response, "Stronger than you were," and he's like, "Whatever you say, Walker. No matter what happens next, don't be too hard on yourself. Even now, after all you've done, you can still go home. Lucky you.
Yeah.
And so this will lead.
But you shoot the mirror, right?
Yeah, it crashes.
And it breaks the mirror.
Yeah, the mirror collapses.
Which is your reflection of yourself.
Yeah.
You just re-enter back into the
That's the
unconscious
thing.
mind.
It could be seen as denying this, but it could also be seen as killing the part of Walker that is, the hallucination, essentially.
That's
the part of
true.
him that's
Yeah.
making up excuses.
So he is still accepting what happened, but it's like he's not going to shoot himself there. He's going to accept that and go home
and
with that
just
and
never
bear the
never sleep
responsibility
at
of it or
night for the
whatever.
rest of his
Essentially,
life.
do you make the
Yeah.
same choice Conrad did, just that
Yes.
you can't live with yourself and you're going to stop because of
Yeah.
that? Or do
Now-
you accept what you've done and continue on?
Was it clear
So,
how Conrad
choice.
died?
I think
Did Conrad kill
he
himself?
shot himself.
I
right?
thought so,
'Cause
too.
He takes the gun. He takes the
Yes.
gun out of his hand.
So Conrad, we see Conrad's choice when faced with this exact same dilemma, and
Yeah.
he shot himself.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Out on the balcony overlooking the destruction that he
Yep.
couldn't stop and also helped perpetuate.
Right, exactly. So that ending, well, that leads into two, again, other possible things. So in the epilogue, there's some soldiers that come and arrive because Walker puts out a distress signal. Hey, this is Captain Walker. I'm requesting immediate evacuation.
Similar to Conrad's message, right?
Very similar. In
Yeah.
fact, there's a really good
Survivors.
bookend kind of line here.
Yes. Oh,
a
it's
really
really
good
good.
bookend line here because Conrad's message ended with death toll too many.
Too many.
And then he says survivors one too many.
One too many.
Or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, they come in to save him, and you can either drop your weapon and go with them, which leads to some pretty good lines. So
That's right. You could. Yeah, that's right. Because they're about to shoot you because you're holding a weapon and
Right,
you're all
and you're
kind
all-
of sort of hallucinating a little bit,
yeah,
right?
dazed or not responding or whatever to their
Yeah.
This is my other favorite choice, and for similar reasons as the other one. Like, there is no, press this button to drop your weapon, press this weapon to attack everyone or whatever. It's just that
Yeah.
you will do one or the other. You can go
Exactly.
forward and, not attack anyone, just allow this to end. Or you can go like, well, there's a shooter, those are targets. Here we go.
Right. Did you learn anything or not? Because once again, these are American soldiers coming to pick you up. Now, in a typical video game like Call of Duty, American soldiers means, oh, this is great. But you've been fighting American soldiers this whole time. And when a troop of American soldiers shows up to you, it's almost like your first reaction is, oh, yeah, we killed these guys, right? Because, first of all, who's to say these are the reinforcements? These could be more of the 33rd people.
Yeah, exactly. So if you hand the gun over, they're basically saying, we drove through this whole city. We saw some crazy stuff. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't mind me asking, how did you survive? And his line in response is, who said that I did?
Who said that I did?
Which I thought was really great. He's going to have to go live with what he did. Like you said, he's shot and shattered the illusion, the false sort of like
Right.
story he's put in his mind, and now he's going to go home and live with that or bear the burden of that.
Right.
The
Honestly,
other way,
this line is a lot of the reason I don't really like the "he was dead the whole time" ending, because
Gotcha.
I feel like
Yes.
it cheapens this line a lot.
I agree.
Like,
True.
This
I
is so much more meaningful as like I will never escape what I did here than it is as like, oh, he was dead.
Yeah.
That's kind of cheap to me.
This particular ending, which I do like a lot, makes no sense if he died in the helicopter crash.
Yeah,
It just
yeah.
makes none at all. Some of the other endings I think work just fine if he died in the helicopter crash, but this one, which I think is a really strong ending, does not work at all. So I think this would be the best. And again, maybe we as we learned, they were forced. Their hand was forced into making the helicopter crash be the first thing in the game. That's the whole reason for this debate on whether he's alive or not in the first place.
Yeah.
But maybe this was more along the lines of what the original ending was, and they kept it in there because it's really strong, but it doesn't necessarily make sense if he's supposed to have died, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, and why I approach that the way I do. Just because, like, it seems fairly clear to me that the game wasn't. Well, I mean, we know for a fact, for one, but like also just the evidence of the game itself. It wasn't made for that.
Yes.
That was a reaction. It was done, after everything else in response to something, and I think that the game reads perfectly solidly without it.
Yes. Okay, the other thing you can do here is shoot at the soldiers, and they kill you, which leads to him having a memory of a conversation he had with Conrad about there's a certain line we have to cross, and if we're lucky, we then die at that point. But you can also, if you're good enough at the game, actually take out the whole unit.
Really?
Yeah.
Then
and
what?
so then he gets on the radio. Walker does, and he says, "Welcome to Dubai, gentlemen," to the other U.S. soldiers. So he basically becomes Conrad 2.0,
Yes,
literally,
of course.
in that ending.
Wow.
So those are the three variations if you go that way. You shoot Conrad at the mirror. The other two things you can do is either wait till the count of 5, where Conrad then asks, "Is this really what you want?" He gives you even more time to think, and then he shoots you, and then you see Walker dead, and you get that line from Conrad's distress signal message, survivors or death toll too many. Or you can shoot Walker, who he ends up putting the gun and shooting himself, and it leads to the same ending. So those are all the different endings. I think we've gone through everything here. Let's read a couple comments and respond to some things here.
Which preferred ending? No.
I don't know if I have a preferred ending in this case. I mean, it's all
the one
pretty...
that's the happiest one for Walker, I guess. Like where he goes back, and I don't know.
I mean, I like that because he's accepting responsibility.
Yes. Instead of just dying.
Acceptance is always a theme that I like. I think it's just such an important thing to learn to do in life. To not this whole game is basically a warning of that. It's like accept or else if you keep denying it, you'll just dig a bigger hole for yourself, right?
So he comes out of the hole through the elevator, finally accepts everything, and then he just has this crap to live with.
He
forever.
has to live with that. So I like
which is
that
the
ending,
best.
but...
Yeah.
Okay, so now I want to jump into a sentiment that was shared by two commenters in particular, Wild Matsu and also Tiago Alves Souza. They said similar things, so I'm only going to read the one from Wild Matsu. But this was something I just really in particular wanted to respond to. He says, "I don't particularly think Spec Ops: The Line is a well-written game, and I don't think its message is particularly intelligent or insightful. It's an interesting game, but I think it's a game that does not do a particularly good job making the points it tries to make. Over and over again, you allude to the common criticism of the game, that it makes you do bad things and blames you for doing bad things. I don't think it does, but okay. You don't try to explain why this criticism is wrong. I thought we did, but we'll do it more thoroughly now."
I feel like that's also something to do now. Yeah, I feel like we were kind of saving
it for later.
The end.
Yeah. "The criticism is not wrong, but even if it was, the mere fact that criticism is so common goes a long way to prove that the game is bad at making this point." Now, this is one thing I can extend a little bit an olive branch on this point. And I alluded to this earlier. I think that its attempt to weave the meta with the fictional, literal, what's happening in the game can lead to some confusion on this point. And I believe that people have sort of latched onto the meta in a very, very literal way that I don't believe was intended. So I think that there's a little bit of the criticism punching at a phantom here, like fighting against a point that was never actually there.
Right.
So that's one point of view.
I think I have to reject the idea that if it didn't work for a lot of people, that means it wasn't good.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't really think that's how art works, but I also think that in
especially
this case,
not critical art.
Right. And I definitely, especially not in a case like this where like a lot of the point was to provoke, essentially. Like, this is supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, even upset or frustrated, and that kind of thing is often something that happens in really good art, but it's also something that makes it so a lot of people will not connect with it or will not be able to accurately process it, and I don't think that makes it worse. So I don't know. I think that's a false premise personally, but
I think that if one of the goals of this game is to be critical of the most popular game in the world, and to try to trick the people who like that game into playing your game, and then to reflect on themselves. A lot of people are not going to like that. Like, they're just not going to like that, and you are asking for a negative response if that's one of your goals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you just kind of have to be okay with that and say, okay, a lot of people aren't going to like this, but we're doing it anyways.
Let me finish the comment here. You say the game isn't talking to players who are looking for an alternate to use the white phosphorus. So I want to clarify this point, because there was two people who said this. What I meant when I said that this game isn't necessarily talking to you was not, as the thinking player,
if you're thoughtful,
this game isn't for you, right? Like, this game is not... this was made for the non-thinking shooter people who just want to have. I'm not saying that the game itself is therefore like no longer meaningful or insightful to the thinking person. What I'm saying is that when the game says, "Do you feel like a hero yet?" and points this sort of accusatory finger, which I don't think is really an accusatory finger. It's just a pointed, I think, clever sort of sentence that's meant to make you think. Again, an invitation to think about this on a deeper level. That they're not pointing to you, the thinking person who tried to look for every possible way to not use white phosphorus, and say, "Do you feel like a hero yet?" That's not what they're saying. They're not. That's they said over and over again in all of the developer quotes that we read, that they were kind of hoping people would come into this thinking it was going to be
mindlessly,
a mindless sort of typical military shooter game.
Yeah.
And he brings, I want to read the rest of it because this will lead into my next point. Too bad those people are the only ones who played the game, he's saying, the thinking players. The hypothetical Call of Duty fan who is mindlessly playing Spec Ops The Line after work doesn't exist because none of those people bought it. The game was exclusively bought and played by people like you and me who heard it was a brutal deconstruction of war shooters and played it to see how it did that. And how it does it is this: it railroads you into doing bad things and screams at you through the fourth wall over how terrible the things you did are. I played this game years and years ago, long before it was featured on the podcast. I didn't like it then, and the series has not changed my mind on it. The game tells you could have stopped at any point. This is false. You are never given an option to turn around, abort the mission, or do anything meaningfully different. Thus, the only possible interpretation you could have stopped at any time is you could have turned the game off. In fact, when I explained why I did not like this game on forums years ago, I had fans of the game tell me exactly that. I'm sorry, but when a game's message is you should not play this game, the game's story is fundamentally broken at its core. I'm not saying it's not interesting, but it's broken and refutes its own point. When there's such a deep contradiction at work in a work of art, it loses the ability to comment on anything external to itself. He follows with another comment. I just typed this comment before I got to the part where Kaysen says you could have turned the game off. The fact that this podcast repeats that tired refrain only proves my point further. When it comes down to it, defenders of this game cannot help but fall back on a "you shouldn't have played this game." When a game's most ardent defenders are all in agreement you shouldn't play it, I don't think it's a particularly hard choice.
I would like to say I am not in agreement on that, but we'll
go
get
for
to
it. Well, why don't you start with a response to that, if you want?
Oh, there's a lot, but okay. To that specific point, I think that it is a common refrain because it is like an interesting, easy point to make, both in favor of the game and against it. But I don't think that, I think that if you're saying that that is like a major point of the game, or that it is a literal thing the game is saying, that we're missing something there. We're focusing on the wrong thing, because the idea is not that we shouldn't have played the game. The idea is that opting into the experience is essentially just that our role is participatory. It's not literally saying you shouldn't play the game. It is saying by playing this game, there is a degree of complicity. That's not something that means that you should turn it off. It's also not something that means that you are responsible for the bad things that happen in the game, but you do have to accept that you are choosing to do this.
And there is always
think about why.
Right. There is always a choice, right? That's just to repeat that line, but go ahead, keep going.
That's just the thing. I think that the idea, because obviously when Conrad says like none of this would have happened if you just stopped, that is canonically true of Walker in the story, and that's important. But I think that the meta commentary there isn't to say, hey, you, the player, should have stopped playing the game. It's just to bring attention to the fact that you
could
are participating in it.
Yeah.
That is a choice that you are making. And it does not want you to not make that choice, but it wants you to be aware of the fact that you are making that choice and to think about why.
I like that.
That's just in general, I think, a lot of what this game is doing. It's not trying to say, hey, you chose to do bad things in the game, and that's a problem. It's saying you are playing this game, and there are reasons why you're playing it. I think that I said before, basically, that it's just a game that refuses to hold up its end of the bargain. It doesn't say that you're a great guy doing a great job for shooting all the guys. It is, I suppose, on some level fundamentally broken because it intentionally doesn't do the thing that a game story is supposed to do and tell you that you're doing a great job and that this is what you should have done. It patently refuses to do that. It does the opposite. Yeah. And that is not how most game stories work, but I don't think that it's a flaw. It's intentional.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just for the could have turned it off thing. There's a lot more there, but we'll get to it.
Okay. Do you have any responses or anything?
I don't, not at the moment, other than like I accept the idea, the critique of that maybe that's not the best critique is fine. You know, you don't have to give much weight to that critique if you don't like it. That being said, there is always a choice.
Yeah.
You never don't have a choice.
So here were some of my thoughts on this as I was thinking about things this last couple weeks. So first of all, I really, really, really don't believe that the game developers actually wanted you at some point to turn the game off and stop playing.
No.
So if people are using that as a defense of the game, well, you should have just stopped playing it, I think that misses the point just as hard as going the other way, that they made me do bad things and then screamed at me about how bad I am.
Totally, yeah.
I don't think they're doing that, first of all. I don't think they're telling you you're a bad person. I know you're going to bring up the specific lines, do you feel like a hero yet? All those things that are, again, very pointed in like the little written portions of the loading screens.
Yeah.
But
the lines about being a hero are way more important and central, I think. But sorry, continue.
But I really don't think that those were done in a spirit of trying to place guilt on the player for having played the video game.
No.
This is where I think the meta message and the literal story of Walker mesh in a way to where maybe there's a kind of a blurred area here. Walker was the bad person who should feel guilty about his actions.
Yes.
Not the player for participating in playing the game.
But in a game, the player identifies with the character, as he should.
Yeah, and
one should.
But that is an exercise
like
we all
secondary.
understand is one that is without like real world blame or guilt or something like that.
Yeah, until we find out in the future we were all in Ender's Game and this actually all... Oh, wait, sorry, I don't want to... Never mind. I'll delete that one.
Anyway, I can see why someone... It's not like it's totally without merit.
Right.
To have read a line like that and be like, why are you blaming me for something you made me do?
Because I played the game.
I'm not saying that it's totally without merit to have read it that way.
Yeah.
But I also think in light of what the game's getting at here with the story of Walker and everything we've talked about, which I think is the more important point, when you really believe that you've got it all figured out, and really you really have no idea, which is most people.
Yes.
Like most people are
Sadly.
not nearly as well informed as they think they are. I don't care. Again, I don't care where you land ideologically.
Right.
Most people just are not aware. We get our information from second, third sources. We were never actually there in person and witnessed it.
Yeah.
So we are subject to receiving this information from biased sources, and it's very, very hard to filter through that. So, you know, when we become so convinced that we've got it figured out and we know what's going on, and we make choices, particularly choices of this magnitude, the life and death of other people, or choices that are in that ballpark of severity, of the impact they will have, you can cause a lot more harm than you intend to when you're certain that you're doing the right thing, and when you're doing it for your own sort of advancement or glory or praise in the end, right? Mm-hmm. When that's really what you're doing it for, not for the reason you'll give, which is to save lives or to help people or whatever it might be. It's very easy to get caught up in that. It's very easy to make assumptions about a situation when you first come into it. Be like, oh, I know what's going on here. And then you just start making mistake after mistake after mistake.
Yeah.
And what you should do in that situation is pull back.
Withdraw and wait for reinforcements.
Yes. And wait for more context.
Yes, exactly.
Or make an attempt at least before you start taking action to get a better view of what's going on.
Right. Ask questions,
So
reconnaissance. Yeah.
That's like really at the heart, I feel, of what's going on. And so once you've made those mistakes, then do you, what is in human nature to then justify and continue to validate and partake in what we all fall victim to is the fallacy of sunk costs. We think the more we put into something, we've got to make it work.
Got to keep going.
And at some point, you've got to be able to step back and say, it's not worth it anymore. This is actually doing way more harm than good, and I need to accept that and move on. That's what the game's about. Mm-hmm. So the fact that this meta-narrative, which is also part of it, which is posing questions about violence in games and how we use it as a reward, and like you talked about in your video, the white phosphorus being a perk in a Call of Duty multiplayer, right?
Yeah.
It's just... I think the invitation here is just, let's just think about that for a second. I don't think it's making a declaration of any kind that this is wrong, Call of Duty shouldn't be made anymore, there should no longer be violent video games. It's not making anything so concrete as that. Yeah. As much as it is just putting you in a situation where in this game's case, this is extremely harmful. And what mindset did you come into this with? And maybe you should think a little bit more about that.
Right.
And maybe started a dialogue and discussion in the gaming community as developers and as consumers. How should we treat violence in games going forward? Should we be this frivolous about it? Is there a level of desensitization happening? I believe there is. And I tell you, I'm the last person to accept this idea that video games cause violent behavior. I would never, I've always fought against that. I don't believe it's true. So I'm not even saying that. I'm saying, but there is a certain level of desensitization to violent images that has happened for me, where it just doesn't bother me anymore. Like there was a certain number of people, even in the comments, were like, that image you used as the thumbnail, right? And I was like, oh, it's just a corpse. But that's the point.
Yeah.
The point that my mind is like, it's a military shooter. Of course, there's a corpse in the game. It's not that bad of an image. It's pretty normal,
right?
Particularly for this genre and that sort of thing. Or people, Mortal Kombat has been super, super controversial from the beginning about how, but Mortal Kombat's a completely silly game.
It's not silly.
And the gore and all of that, but the point is that's still a level of desensitization that's happening. And, you have people bring up all the time the way that we treat sexual content in movies and games and books and the way that people fight so hard against that. But like violence is almost very, very rarely is it something that people, it's so accepted as part of entertainment value. And
since Roman times.
Yeah. And again, this is not meant to say we should stop doing that. It's just an invitation to think about it differently and to approach maybe the way you think about this differently. I really, really don't. And I know this because we read an interview with the guy who said it, that they wanted you to feel guilty for what they made you do in the game.
Right.
I think that is a really, really wrong way to look at this. And getting defensive about it, I don't see how. And this is maybe a failing on my part. Maybe somebody will comment and give further clarification. But I just don't really see how anyone could. It blows my mind that people are taking that away from this. It's a story about a person who did bad things.
Right.
And in order for it to make its point, the person has to do the bad things. The fact that it's
an interactive story. It's a game.
Right.
So yeah, you are by proxy doing it.
You are by proxy doing it, but not in the way in which you're supposed to feel guilty, but just in the way
it's just the story.
I participate in this level of simulated violence all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't really think about it as it being a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not a big deal. That's not the point either. The point is just consider it.
Just think about it.
Consider for a second.
And if you're done thinking about
whether
it,
or
great.
not, like, we have desensitized ourselves too much to violence in games. And using them as rewards, is that necessarily always the right move? Should we treat this with more respect? Should we, put more weight on that? That's all I believe that they're asking you to do here. I don't think... Go ahead.
This is just always a fun subject to get into, especially now, because I think that, speaking of defensiveness, that there exists within video game culture currently, and has for quite a while now, a kind of spirit of defensiveness. And on some level, I get it. Like, when I was growing up and really starting to understand video games as an art form, we had people like Jack Thompson trying to literally ban video games through the American legal system by claiming that they, inspired and even trained people for mass shootings. Like, there was a real common sense that a lot of us grew up with that, there were a lot of these people not only saying that video games were inherently harmful, but actively trying to get them censored because of that.
Yeah.
And what we have had more recently is that as video games have matured as a medium and been more accepted culturally, we have begun to apply the same kind of critical theory and examination that we do to, literally every other art form that exists. And as that has happened, we do the same thing that happens with all those art forms, is we start uncovering some cultural problems, some stereotypes, some tendencies, some harmful tropes, things like that. And someone can come out and say, hey, a lot of video games treat women in this very specific kind of sexist way, and maybe that's not great. And what a lot of us gamers hear is video games will make you sexist and we need to ban them. And that's not what's being said at all. Right. But that is how it is. That's how it's often received because of that defensiveness. I think that we have, as a culture, that we as gamers have pretty drastically failed to adjust our approach to criticism of our medium as it has shifted from a bunch of outside people saying that games are bad and should be banned to a bunch of inside people saying, I love these and here's how I think they could improve.
Yeah.
And so it is so important to note what you were saying about how, like, Spec Ops is not sitting here saying, hey, violence in video games is bad, you're a bad person for enjoying it, and you should never play any game with violence in it. It is approaching it with an understanding that art affects the people who experience it, which is not a controversial statement. That is
that's the point.
Yeah, like it's basically just we study art for precisely that reason. We make art for precisely that reason.
Art tells you a lot about culture.
Yeah, and it
sure.
is simply asking us to consider. Honestly, I think that it comes back to like Heart of Darkness and stuff. Like all of these stories have this supposition, like, sure, the place that is being gone to in these stories, whether it's, the depths of Vietnam during the war, or the depths of the Congo or whatever, are used as like, a metaphor for your own darkness, but it is your own darkness. These places do not infect you with evil. It is in us. And there are scenarios in which it is brought out. And starting with Apocalypse Now, when war started becoming part of it, there's an element of like, these people have to touch and control that darkness. They cannot avoid it. They have to do it because that is what they do. They are killing people. They have to do that, and that irrevocably changes them and damages them. And so it feels like what Spec Ops is doing is sort of expanding that to like, yeah, this is not going to turn you into a killer, but you are touching that darkness on some level, and you're doing so carelessly, like just for fun, without thinking about it, without considering it or considering why, and that there's nothing wrong with touching that darkness. It's an important thing for all of us to understand about ourselves, and something that we do often have to come into contact
in a lot
with,
of ways,
we
I
should
think
maybe be mindful about it.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, simulating touches with that darkness are actually healthy.
Oh, yeah.
It's a healthy way to approach doing it.
Yeah.
A healthy way to engage with some of that, and to make decisions about, okay, how do I deal with that? How do I integrate that in a healthy way, right?
Yeah.
So video games can be a very healthy way for you to touch on some of that, like violent tendencies and things like that. And again, it might need to be guided for some people, but like coming to terms with the fact that this exists inside of you, and how do I deal with that in a healthy way? So again, I really don't think, well, I won't repeat myself on that. I don't think that they were trying to make you feel like a horrible person for playing the game. Yeah. They were trying to point out that what Walker did was horrible, but he did so without meaning to hurt anybody. And this is something we can easily do. So we're touching on something and participating in it in a way that shows us we're all, as average people, capable of this kind of thing, when we don't consider that maybe we don't know everything that's going on.
Right, yeah.
Right? We got to be careful about that. That's what it's trying to say.
And you are touching on, I think, another one of the main... Like, I kind of implied this, but I skirted around it. And so even though it might make some people mad, I'm just going to say it, that reaction of like, oh, the game is criticizing me for doing the things they told it to, that is an emotional response.
Yeah.
It's not a critical one. And like, emotions are valid, but they are not always indicative of the actual like truth of what's going on. And in this case, I absolutely think that that's an emotional response that is not accurately thought through. Since we project ourselves onto the protagonist of a game, onto the player character, when the game criticizes Walker and also in no uncertain terms suggests that it's criticizing us too, we assume that we are being criticized for the same things Walker's being criticized for.
Oh, that's a good point.
We're not.
Like, that's a very good point.
Not what the game is saying. Now, ironically, if the game did give us a choice to do less evil things, then that would be what the game is saying. Because
Absolutely.
then we would have made those choices or not. But
because it's an actual choice.
Yeah, Walker is being criticized for the choices he made, for the things that he did. The game is not taking issue with us for playing along on that. The game is taking issue with the way that we theoretically entered this expecting that we were going to that the game was going to guide us through doing the right thing, murdering people in a way that was good, and then was going to congratulate us for it. And when it didn't do that, I mean, that we should feel uncomfortable, even angry, like, I get it. But I think that we then assume that the game is saying that the thing that we did wrong is the same thing Walker did wrong, and it's just not doing that. The game does not want us to regret having played it. It wants us to think more deeply, which also gets to the whole like criticism about like, oh, well, the game wasn't for you or whatever. Here's the thing. Spec Ops wants the inattentive player to become more attentive. If you played this game and caught on to what it was doing, then it's not that Spec Ops isn't for you, it's that Spec Ops wants you to be exactly what it turns out you already are.
Yes.
Like, it is trying, it is advocating for more people to think about things in the way that you are thinking about it. And so it's true, it might not work as well for you in that case. It's very much kind of made with the assumption in mind that you will be coming at it the way your average gamer does. But that is not, I think that if it doesn't work as well for you, then that is something that it essentially means that you're already what the game wants you to be. And like, I don't know. I just think that's a way more accurate and positive way of thinking about it than like it wasn't for you if you didn't go through it without thinking. I don't know. It wants all gamers to be like that. It wants all of us to think more deeply about what we're playing. And if you already did, then cool. The game isn't criticizing you then,
Yeah. Okay. So there's just two very quick things I want to say, and then we'll wrap up. Number one, it was on the point that he was making about nobody that you're talking about, these inattentive
played the game.
Yeah. I would like to see some numbers on that. That's a pretty strong claim to make.
I mean, certainly after 10 years, the only people that play it now are like people who heard that it was,
Yeah, sure.
But at the time it came out, I would assume a lot of people picked it up off the shelf at Blockbuster.
For sure.
Blockbuster still existed in 2012. I think it did.
2012.
In which case, that's what they were going for. To the extent that those people didn't play the game, that's not their fault. First of all.
Yeah. I will say it is true that was even early on part of why people play, because it was a pretty low profile release, and a lot of people, myself included, first heard about it by Yahtzee Crowshaw's Zero Punctuation review, where he is pretty explicit about the fact that the game is what it is essentially. Yeah. So a lot of people did play it because they were curious about that, but I think that a lot of people also didn't.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
And for two, I don't think that I don't think that a game needs to build itself around the circumstances of its future release. I don't think they knew that's how that was going to go down.
Sure.
Right.
I don't know. That seems like a weird expectation. But sorry, I think you have to say.
But I was just going to say, it's easy when you're on forums and discussing games like this in this sort of intellectual manner to assume like the majority of people are like you.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was watching videos on Spec Ops, just trying to get like a beat on different scenes and see how they could have gone for choices I didn't make. And there's a guy talking about how fun the game is. And it's just like, this is a really cool game. And it's just like, oh, you could do this. I just shot him instead. And he's like, he's totally not getting it, right? This is exactly who...
Those people are still playing the game.
Right. Those people are definitely still playing the game. And I would still think they're probably the majority of people who play the game.
Those people are still playing a lot of games, too, for that matter. That kind of mindless approach is not gone by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
I'm sure there are many people who played it who the whole freaking concept was lost on them.
Yeah.
And they just played it for fun. So... I think that it's a little bit too strong a claim to say, well, this was only bought by people like us. I'm not sure that that's true. Now, last thing I'm going to say, and I think this is really important to say. I do not think that people who didn't think that the game landed well or didn't make its point well enough are necessarily wrong. I do think there are problems with the fact that they railroaded you into the white phosphorus scene. These things, there are definitely things here that are valid points that people have made. It's just that in the end, it was kind of like we were talking about, like, do the fade to white happen here? Does it mean he's dreaming now or he's hallucinating now?
Right. Was the execution perfect?
All of this, the execution of this game is not perfect by any means. Like, not even close.
Yeah.
I would say, as a retelling of the story of Heart of Darkness or something like that, it's the weakest of the iterations we talked about. Like, Apocalypse I would say Now. Heart of Darkness and Apocalypse Now were better tales of this kind. That, again, I'm not disparaging it. I think it's a very good game. But I do think there are execution points that people bring up that are valid. So I'm not trying to say you didn't enjoy the game, you didn't think it got its message across the right way. You're wrong for thinking that. All I'm saying is...
nothing will work the same for everyone either in the first place. That's just how that goes.
But what I think is wrong, the part that I'm strongly opposed to in this criticism, is that the game wants you to feel guilty like Walker is guilty, as you said. I just really don't think that that's what they're getting at. And people who are casting stones at that idea, you're casting stones at ghosts. Like, this was never meant to be what you're supposed to take away from it, I don't think. And anyway. So
that's what's so frustrating about it, is because I want to allow people to have their own opinions. For that matter, it doesn't matter if I allow other people to have their own opinions. They're gonna. Like, I don't control. They don't need my permission. But I don't want to disparage people for having different opinions. It's just that at the same time, a lot of the reasons stated are just not in good faith, or they're extremely reductive, and that kind of thing, like, I don't know. It's always important for me to understand why I think something that I think. And when I see a thought that is different from mine, I'm like, yeah, that's valid. But sometimes the reasoning just doesn't check out. And I'm like, I don't know about that. And, I guess that's what happens here. Like, with it's a guilt trip trying to make you feel bad thing. That's not what the game's doing.
Yeah.
Right.
But you'd have to take you'd have to assume, like, the worst about the developer's intentions to come to that conclusion. And typically, I don't like to do that. I'd rather give them the benefit of the doubt that they did not go into this maliciously, with the intent to make you feel guilty for something that you clearly have no reason to feel guilty for.
Right.
So we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. I don't. Sorry, Walt Williams has said enough that makes it just like clear that that's not the case. He said that Spec Ops wasn't a war story; it was a story of you and me. He talked about the relationship between the developer and the player and stuff like that. This was an attempt to have a conversation in a way that is very inflammatory. Fair, but an attempt to have a conversation in a way that most games don't. Most games put up the facades that make you get lost in them, and this one tore them down violently in front of your face. And I understand people having a bad reaction to that. It's disorienting and maybe kind of frustrating and weird and uncomfortable, but I also think that it's very interesting and that it worked if you consider what it was actually trying to do instead of getting annoyed at what you kind of think immediately that it was trying to do.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Okay, that's going to be it for this podcast, this series on Spec Ops. Thank you, Sam, for joining us.
Yeah,
Thank you, everyone, for watching us. Go check out his channel.
I always love talking about this game. I have so many soapboxes about it, so, obviously, as you can tell.
Yeah. Go check out Games is Lit on YouTube. Lot of really good stuff. I also really loved the video did on Final Fantasy VII a couple of years ago. I thought that was a really, really brilliant one. So we have a lot of people, Final Fantasy fans on this channel. Go watch that. I think it's a really, really good watch. So appreciate you again, man, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again in the future.
Looking forward to it.
Okay. See you, everybody.